village is 3 days before they come back to the main village saying, okay, we get it. You got all the girls, we got it. So they give them absolute freedom. Now sure, something could happen. A kid could chop off his foot, cutting firewood, could trip in the dark. I mean, things could happen and they do, but it would be much less than what we're seeing now. In trying to protect our kids from the difficulties of rites of passage, we've created much more drama and damage. I mean, there's something almost 10,000 kids a year dying in Los Angeles alone, just in gangs. If we were initiating all these kids, I know we wouldn't be losing 10,000 of them. So that's what we need to kind of look at. Okay, rites of passage have to be attainable. This is a really key piece when we start thinking about how we want to work with our kids. They have to be made so that every initiate can do it. It can't be about brute strength, or the smaller guys couldn't do it. It can't be about dunking a basketball, or a lot of us wouldn't get into the club. It's about heart. It's about persistence. You know, it's about endurance. So it doesn't matter if you're a little tiny skinny person or if you're a big, strong, tough person. Everybody gets the same ability because it's just like childbirth. In theory, every woman made has the ability to endure, you know, the pain of childbirth. This has to be designed the same way. So you can't make it so it's impossible for him to do. It has to be possible. So it's almost always about pain and endurance and coping. A lot like childbirth. Mostly what it does is mimic those processes. The test is mental. It's really not physical. It is physical, but the test is in here. It's about heart. This is why sports don't work. In America, they think, you know, like NFL football makes you a man. But the problem is in any kind of sport system, half of everybody loses. What happens in this community if half your children don't make it to adulthood? You don't have much of a community, do you? So we can't rely on sports. We can't rely on the military anymore, which has been forever a way, you know, boys go off to war and come back men. That's kind of changing in modern times because, you know, wars, at least for America now, aren't even called wars anymore. Our war in Korea in the 50s was a police action, and our Vietnam War was technically a conflict, although 55,000 people died. And we haven't never declared war on Iraq, although we've been there twice, so it's kind of strange. And things have changed, you know, like the Vietnam vets have been really struggling. More Vietnam vets in America have died of suicide than ever died in the war. And what we found is they were the first generation of soldiers who went to war and did the risk and didn't get the community acceptance. See, when they came back, when we found out that Vietnam was a bad war, a political war in the early 70s, and they brought them back, people were spitting on them and calling them baby killers and things like that. And they didn't get the ticker tape parade like the World War II guys did. They didn't get the pat on the back. And they're really confused because they did the killing and the risky stuff, but nobody said it was cool. So now they're pretty lost. One of the problems now is the modern warriors are the computer geeks, driving to Predator drones from Las Vegas, Nevada, and going home at 5 o'clock every day to your wife and your kids. That's a strange kind of military that we're doing. And nothing personal, but it's really hard for a boy to feel like a man when his commander is a woman, which is okay, but it's just not working as a rite of passage piece. And then the educational and the training demands are getting higher. Right now, even our Marine Corps won't take anybody without a high school diploma. It used to be a way to get out of the ghetto. Nowadays, because we're not using any soldiers, which is good, we're not losing a lot of people, but we're also not using a lot of people. So it's getting really hard to get into the military to get the training or whatever it is that you want to do there. So right now, we've taken that away from the kids. Here's some examples of some rites of passage. This was a very simple one. Up in the northwest of America, they used to take kids a mile from shore in that very cold Pacific Ocean. And it was real simple. They'd get a mile out and they'd say, swim to shore. Now this is one of the few that included boys and girls together. So what happens if you didn't make it to shore? You didn't make it to shore, and that was that. So that one was dangerous. But if you made it to shore, there was no question. But everybody knows what's going to happen with this rite of passage. So if you had a child, and you knew on his 14th summer he was going to have to swim a mile from shore, what would you be doing for the first 13 years of his life? Teaching that boy or that girl how to swim, right? So you prepare them so that they're ready. You know, there's the kill a lion. That's a kind of a bad metaphor. Circumcision is very common in rites of passage because, again, they need to mimic the difficulty, the pain, and the relationship to the genitalia that's associated with childbirth. So there's a lot of circumcision and cutting on the guys, and gives me goosebumps. Lots of bloodletting, lots of scarring, lots of tattooing, lots of stuff that's painful. And the boys actually have to take this quietly, stoically, and they can't whine or complain because that's considered feminine and not good. So they have to sit there and just let people, you know, cut on them or whatever they do and take it. Okay, so real quickly, you don't initiate somebody who's not deemed capable of survival. Now, in the old days, we wouldn't initiate a boy or a girl if they couldn't make a fire or cook or make a bow and arrow or all the basics that they needed to survive in the community that they lived in. So whatever it is that our kids need to survive now is what we have to work on. The problem is it's getting really confusing because about all we give our kids is school. So they have to be able to take care of themselves. Who would ever want to try and make a youth an adult who wasn't ready? But that's what we do with birthdays. At 18, you get to drink. Doesn't matter if you're ready. There's a couple people in America trying to bring back testing of some sort so that at like 15 you can challenge the driving rule, or at 16 you can challenge the drinking rule on some sort of maturity responsibility test, because why should I have to wait if I really am a really mature young person, which is the way it used to be. There was no actual age on these things. And then there's self-ornamentation, where it used to be like the Maoris of Samoa and Tonga and New Zealand. The tattoos used to be the proof that you had done something. And nowadays, I think with the big trend of tattoos is too many guys think that the tattoo is the rite of passage. Oh, it was so painful. Oh, I got a full sleeve. It cost me $1,400 and it hurt for a couple hours. It's not a rite of passage. So contemporary rites of passage, modern days, here's the problem. But here's what's workable. Since we're looking for this critical moment, you can do that internally. What we're trying to do now in modern times is have a teenager slay his or her own internal dragon. Kill your addiction. Kill your anger. Kill your gang affiliation. That can be done in modern times. So we can take that same moment of huge decision making, which was the boy stepping into the manhood. We can do that as long as we remember that it's an internal moment of decision, and it always is, whether you're going to take it or not. Even in the old school rites of passage, this is how it worked. Now, too often we kind of confuse this with the literal behavior of, slaying the dragon or literally pulling out your sword and whooping something. It doesn't work. We're going to have to figure out what to do with the risk piece, fighting against the insurance piece. We're seriously losing that battle in America, where the insurance companies are running the country and the insurance and the medical industry and everything. We are totally losing that war. Wilderness therapy, we touched on. It's a great start, but it needs community acceptance. It needs a model after it. It is not complete in and of itself, although it's about one of the best models you can do. It's only halfway there. It's the risk part. And what we all have to figure out is how we build the community support around that. I mean, I've done this stuff like in men's groups and stuff where we all do these big power weekends and we all pat ourselves on the back and we agree that we're men. Got it, finally. And 3 years later, there's only 5 of us left in town. Nobody else knows. We don't have the big tattoo. We don't have the scars. Nobody else knows, so it doesn't work. So we have to find a way. And this is the problem. You can put this kid through this incredible experience. And even if the family supports it, what's the school going to treat this 15-year-old like? Like a 15-year-old. So we have to get the schools to recognize what these kids have been through. And the rest of the families. And it's really, really difficult. It's not impossible. One of the best models I've run into are foster parents. Is that what you call them? People who take in kids with no family? Okay, so they're very good at working with one another. So for example, I do workshops where I'll get 20 families to come in and I'll teach them how to do initiation type work with their kids. And then they have a little village of 20 families for the kids to bounce around, because you and I as father and son, we're always going to butt heads. That's what teenagers and dads do. But you can always go over to her or you can talk to him. So they create little micro communities is what I call them. And that's something that works really well if you can get people to cooperate. So we have to get rid of the arbitrary age system. We have to quit promoting kids based on birthdays. We have to go back to somehow coming up with a model that allows kids to move at their own rate and their own rate of maturity. And we have to accept that some kids are going to be slower, and that's fine, and some kids are going to be ready earlier. And there should be a process for that. The average age of boys being initiated into men is 14. Ironically, it's the same age as girls starting their menstrual cycle. So whoever invented the universe put it together at the same age. But 14, if you were 14 100 years ago, almost anywhere else in the world, you were a man. And if we go back about 100 years, we see, well, I think that's kind of weird now. But if we go back 100 years, or even my grandmother was married at 15. Nowadays, we think that's not good. But the 15-year-old farm girl marrying the 16-year-old boy down the other farm was not considered weird at all. So that's only changed in the last couple of generations to be considered inappropriate. But people have been doing this for a long time. I mean, Gandhi got married at 13. He did okay. Some people argue that our longer lifespan means that there's no rush to initiate anymore. It doesn't matter if I live to be 84, I'm still a teenager only once. So it doesn't mean that where I used to do my initiation at 14, now because I'm going to live to be 80, I should do it at 26. No. It still needs to be done, put away, get my manhood on, and move on and just be a man longer. I don't know if you've seen these movies like Failure to Launch, and these, we call them, it's not going to translate well, adolescents. Half adult, half teenagers. The 30-year-olds who are still living at home. They need to leave and start their own families, even if they move 3 houses down, which is pretty normal. Okay, so real quick, gangs are textbook rite of passage. If you haven't figured it out, they do all the same stuff we talked about. Again, they just don't come back. Hazing, which is also self-initiation, like college pranks and those types of things, are growing in popularity. And basically, they mimic the loss of initiation. Hazing deaths in America now are down into grade schools. Used to be every once in a while a college kid would get killed, and then every once in a while a high school kid got killed. Now we're all the way down to grade school kids getting killed trying to get into some club from being too stupid and too many drugs. One of the great quotes I've ever heard was called, "Prisons are houses of failed initiation." Prisons are houses of failed initiation. Basically, initiated men don't go to prison. Initiation cultures don't have prisons or jails. And there it is. So now we've got kids who are riding subways, tops of trams, tops of elevators. They just keep pushing the edge, trying to prove the risky piece, trying to prove that they're tough, and it doesn't work. If you refuse the call to adventure, if you refuse to do what you're supposed to do, it always just gets worse. Suicide, which is really high in adolescence, is the ultimate refusal of the call to adventure. It's refusing to accept the challenge of life. Drugs and alcohol reliance is also a refusal of the call to adventure to engage in life. And we've got to stop that. We've got to get them to engage in everyday life as a challenge worth living. Also becoming what we call institutionalized, kids getting used to being locked up, being used to being fed, taken care of, clothed, slept. You let them out and they're back 3 weeks later because they don't know how to function in life anymore. That's a refusal of the call to adventure. So these are the outcomes when you stop initiating people. And finally, one more thing on self-initiation. It's real simple. With your teenagers, if we don't initiate them, they're going to do it themselves. And ask yourself how well the teenagers are doing initiating themselves into adults right now. I don't know about your teenagers, but our teenagers are hurting. I've been asking every group for about the last 10 years one simple question. Does anybody in this room think any aspect of teenagers, drugs, gangs, premarital sex, anything, violence in schools, is getting any better anywhere in any way? And in America, not one person will raise their hand anymore, because it's not. And everybody knows it. We just don't know what to do about it. And so finally, last slide. Here's where I think we all have to go. I'm not here to solve, I'm not even going to say that. I'm here to try and help the Czech Republic look at teenagers in a different way. Somebody was nice enough to translate my book into Czech, and some people liked it, and I'm really glad you guys are curious enough to be here. What it really comes down to, and we're going to have a number of conversations beginning tonight, which I'm really excited about, this is where I think it goes, is when you're really working with teenagers and this concept of community acceptance, what has to be included are 5 components. We have to include the family. You can't do this without the family, and the more the better. Got to get them. You've got to include the schools. They may not want to play, but we have to make them play, because look how much time the kids spend at school. You know, kids usually spend more time at school than they actually do interacting with their own family, right? Kids spend 6, 7, 8 hours a day at school. How much time do they actually spend with their family? An hour in the morning, 3 hours at night, and everybody goes to bed. So they actually spend more time at school. Their peers. We can't just blow off their peers, but we have to use their peers, because adolescence is the greatest period of peer connection that we ever have. It's when our friends, our buddies, our homies, our peers are the most important, is when we're teenagers. So we have to include them, and that will also give it value. We have to bring the community at large, Prague, or at least Prague 1, or Prague 6, or however else you break it down. Whatever the community is, even if it's just this room, the community has to be there. And then finally, we have to do something in nature. This can't be done inside. They've never been done inside. They're not supposed to be done inside. We've got to bring nature and spirit into this. And that's where I'd like to leave this and pick up the conversation in a little while. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Brett, for your talk. Moc děkuji Bretovi za to, co nám tady řekl, že přijel. Chtěl bych doplnit jenom jednu informaci, kterou jsem zapomněl zmínit na začátku, a to sice, že když Brett říká, že přijel pomoci našim teenagerům, tak je to myšleno doopravdy, protože celý jeho příjezd sem a tahleta akce je nezisková a on tady pobývá bez nároku na honorář. To je, jenom abyste věděli. Určitě vás napadá spousta otázek, zkuste si je podržet v hlavě, protože ta druhá část, v které budeme debatovat s našimi panelisty, bude věnovaná i vašim otázkám. Budou tam místa, kde se budete moct zeptat na něco. A já bych teďka vás poprosil, dejme si 15 minut přestávku, zkuste ten čas dodržet, aby se nám to moc neroztáhlo. A pokud budete mít zájem, tak ji můžete využít ještě k 2 věcem. Například si koupit Brettovu knihu, pokud ji ještě nemáte, tak je tu možnost, u vchodu by měl být stoleček, kde ta kniha je. A druhá věc je, že pokud vás tohleto téma zajímá, chcete se o něm dozvědět víc, tak by tam měl být taky připraven papír, na který můžete napsat váš e-mail. A organizátoři Brettovy návštěvy vám pošlou materiály k tomuhle tématu. Takže si tu brzy uvidíme. Díky.